Jane Unchained live with a big exclusive. This is a story that has made headlines around the world. California dairy faces animal abuse allegations. You are about to meet the investigator in 1 second. Let's watch this short clip as she comes out of the shadows after 2 years. 2 years going undercover, risking her life for capturing footage of dairy.
My name is Erin Wing. I spent 2 years working in the shadows as an undercover investigator for Animal Outlook. I'm now stepping into the light to share my story about my last investigation. A story about how dismal and barbaric the dairy industry truly is. A large dairy factory farm in California, I experienced and documented the industry's cruel life cycle. Calves being born just to be discarded or become milking machines themselves. Cows being regularly impregnated so their bodies produce the milk people drink, and being violently abused throughout their lives until they are considered spent and slaughtered for cheap beef. All this cruelty, and for what? This is a dying industry, desperate to stay afloat while it drowns everyone else in the process. It's time to let dairy die.
And now meet this heroic undercover investigator, Erin Wing. First of all, my hat's off to you. You are extraordinary. Please tell us what you did for 2 years. Tell the story.
Thank you so much for having me. 2 years as an undercover investigator is very rough, and I will not sugarcoat it at all. It was definitely really trying, and Dick Van Dam Dairy was one of the worst factory farm sites I had ever been to over the course of my entire career as an undercover investigator. I worked at Dick Van Dam Dairy in Riverside County, California, for approximately 2 months. So just to put it into perspective, that's about 60 days. And for nearly every single one of those 60 days, I witnessed and documented the daily torment that dairy cows are put through. Cows were dragged by tractors through dirt and feces and then abandoned in pens without access to food or water, suffering for days without medication until they died. Newborn calves were tossed aside like trash and left to die in the hot sun while covered in blankets of flies. And cows who were barely able to walk to the milking area endured workers beating them, hitting them, striking them with wooden canes, and in some cases, even a metal pipe, in daily acts of extreme aggression and violence. Every single day I worked at Dick Van Dam Dairy was an absolute nightmare.
How did you do it? I explained to you that I was a reporter for many years, and I realized very quickly I could never be an undercover investigator. They sent me once, and I was so terrified, and I was scattered. I telegraphed immediately that something was up, and I have the utmost respect to go in there with a camera over and over again. How did you do it?
It's definitely something that is very trying for an investigator. Essentially, you do, and I've heard this said before, you do live a double life in some cases, and investigators have to shield themselves with an armor throughout their career. And that's definitely what I did, because you are going into these facilities, and at Animal Outlook, everything is legitimate. I use my legitimate name. I used all my information that I have that was completely legitimate to apply. And you go into these places and they're calling you by your name, but you feel like you're an entirely different person because you are another worker at this facility, and you have to witness horrific acts of cruelty against animals over the course of my career, over the course of 2 years. At every single factory farm site I investigated, I documented some instance of cruelty being that these animals were being subjected to. So it's really hard to maintain that armor for 2 whole years. Eventually there are cracks that come up in that armor with everything you have to endure, with everything you have to hold inside. And I felt like that armor was definitely going to break at Dick Van Dam Dairy. So that's why at Dick Van Dam Dairy, during that investigation, I decided that this was where I had to stop. And that was when I decided to end my career as an undercover investigator.
Wow. Unbelievable. Now, I have to read a statement from the Van Dam family lawyer, Stephen Larson. By the way, the Van Dam family, any representative of any dairy representative is invited on Jane Unshined at any time. They describe the allegations as manufactured and false. An Animal Legal Defense Fund followed up by filing a lawsuit, and they attacked the lawsuit. And they said the videos and pictures were either staged or taken wholly out of context, and we look forward to the truth coming out in this lawsuit. And by the way, the USDA and the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service and their USDA National Organic Program have not responded to this investigation. So what is your response to them saying that this is staged, that this is staged, that this and this? I mean, you know, Steven Spielberg would have a challenging time staging something like that. These cows do not come from central casting. What is your reaction?
I would definitely say that I was there in person. I worked there for 2 whole months. I did my duties just as I was told to as a worker, and I documented that firsthand. And in one of the clips, in one of the still images you showed, there was a cow who was suspended nearly 20 feet in the air with a metal hip clamp compressed on her hips. There's a story to that. So the way that started was, I remember it clear as day, and it is documented. It's in the footage. It's in the investigation video, and people are free to see that on YouTube or our website on animaloutlook.org. But the way that happened was this cow collapsed in the back of the milking aisle, and I pointed her out to the day shift manager, and he seemed wholly unconcerned with it, and he ignored her until they realized that she was backing up the production line. And then they resorted to spraying her in the face and body with a high-powered, high-pressure water hose. And they sprayed her until she tried to crawl helplessly away from the abuse through dirt and feces. And she was just unable to stand. At that point, they realized that the high-pressure hose wasn't working, so then they compressed a metal hip clamp on her hips, and they attached that metal hip clamp by a chain to the tractor that they had on the other side of the milking area. And they then proceeded to lift her, drag her, and then lift her, and then suspend her 20 feet in the air, and then pull her basically over the side of that concrete, all over the top of that concrete wall.
And
while the cows were looking.
Let me jump in because we have that video. We're gonna play it. We will play that video now, and you can decide for yourself.
I was scared for the cows and scared for myself. People might say that this doesn't happen on all farms, that one farm can't represent the entire business. Yet I have seen workers use violence as a tool in every factory farm I've been to. The milking aisle was so crowded that cows were forced to trample each other. This cow crawled helplessly through a thick layer of feces on the ground, while a worker sprayed her with a fire hose. Workers stood on her back, attached a metal clamp on her hips, and dragged her against the rough concrete. Confused and in pain, she was then lifted off the ground with a tractor, dangling about 20 feet in the air. I held my breath, wondering what would happen if at least one chain came loose, picturing her body crashing into the cement below. This cruel use of the hip clamp was a common way to move sick or injured cows, referred to in the industry as downer cows. After enduring constant violence and injuries, the cows who collapsed from overexertion or abuse were dragged by tractors through dirt and feces, violently kicked, and forced to endure fingers being jammed into their eyes while helpless on the ground. It was common to see cows suffering from injuries or other ailments, making it difficult or painful for them to walk. I remember bracing my shoulder under limping cows' hindquarters to help them walk in the milking parlor, because I knew that if they didn't move, they would be beaten by other workers.
Unbelievable. And I urge everybody, share this out. That's what I was doing in the final seconds there, because the world needs to see this. So many people feel, I'm going to back away from meat. And they know about the environmental consequences increasingly today, that it's arguably the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions. There's a new white paper that says that. But even the New York Times, for example, is talking about we need to change food production, meat, we reduce it. But somehow people disconnect from dairy. And they have this idea. A lot of people don't even know that dairy cows have to be pregnant to produce milk, that this is the breast milk of another species. Ultimately, this is a consumer issue. What would you say to consumers who are watching this saying, yeah, but I still like to have my cream and my coffee, when there were so many other alternatives? I'm actually having coffee right now with cashew milk. The taste is almost identical. What would you tell consumers, given that you endured hell for a couple of months on this factory farm, but also in other farms, and you've seen the nightmare, you've risked your life, your safety, you've gone through a torturous experience, and all they have to do is make a little bit of a change. And yet they regard that maybe it's not even an inconvenience, it's just an adaptation as some kind of major violation of their rights. What would you say to people who are still consuming dairy?
That's all really good points that you just made. The fact that there are a wealth of plant-based alternatives that we have access to as consumers. And the dairy industry does paint that picture that it's all just happy cows grazing out at pasture. And when you're taking a drive through the country and you see these few cows that are out there and they're grazing, you are unaware of that, covering up the reality of the situation, that this is a massive industry that uses industrial factory style techniques in order to produce this milk and this dairy product that people consume ultimately, or they're trying to get people to rely on consuming. These are things that we don't realize, that we have choices, but the dairy industry is leading us to believe that we don't have any choices. They want us to depend on them. They say that they're doing this public service for people, they're feeding people, they're helping people, but ultimately they're trying to turn a profit, and they're using suffering to do so, the suffering of animals, in order to churn a profit for their funding. So ultimately, consumers have to realize that the dairy industry needs them, and we do not need the dairy industry. We have so many options available to us. You can go on animaloutlook.org, and you can see on tryveg.com or .org. We also have a lot of plant-based recipes and plant-based resources that you can look up yourself, and you have the choice. And you can also make your voice heard. Tell the dairy industry that we won't support this cruelty anymore. We're moving towards a future that is plant-based, that is cruelty-free. It's free from suffering. You sit down to a meal and it's 100% nutrition, 0% guilt. That is plant-based living. And that is a future that I'm fighting for.
Well, to that point, there is good news. We've got McDonald's announcing, after so many organizations have worked literally for decades to get this. Look at this. Plant, lettuce, and tomato. This is making headlines around the world. McDonald's just this week unveiled its own meatless burger, McPlant. And they have been doing a test with Beyond Meat, but they decided to create their own burger. As long as it's vegan and tastes good, whatever. This is a breakthrough, I have to tell you, because so many other fast food franchises have, like Burger King and others, have gotten their own vegan burger out there, but the holdout was McDonald's. So do you see the world changing? And then I want to talk to you about what gave you the gumption, and maybe we should start with that. This is what fascinates me. Why you? Of all the people who It honestly boggles my mind. The hardest thing in this industry, sometimes people say, "Oh, great work, Jane." No, I'm taking what you're doing, putting it on and throwing it on. You're going in there, you're sacrificing your freedom. You're experiencing incredible anxiety. You are carrying a hidden camera. You're doing it day after day. You've got to watch this horrible footage and not do what any instinctive person wants to do, which is run out there and say, stop, stop it. How did you, where have you internally gotten the strength to do all this? What in your history inspired you to be that hero?
I would definitely say that my childhood definitely influenced the way that I see the world and the things that I felt that I could contribute to the major issues that we are facing today. I had to witness a lot of, domestic violence throughout my life as a child, and I definitely have some sort of reaction to the way that animals are treated at these factory farm sites, that they can't speak up for themselves. They can't fight for themselves. They don't have a choice but to be stuck in that situation. And I can relate to that in a lot of ways. And when I tried to figure out when I was younger, I want to change the world. How can I do that? I tried to think of all the issues that we are facing as a society today. And animal agriculture, industrial animal agriculture, is one of the leading causes of a lot of the issues that we have today. I always call it an everything problem because it's got everything. It's got, the speciesism, the environmental issues, the human rights issues, the human health issues, and the animal issues with the treatment of these animals within this industry. It's a huge industry that has a stranglehold on these animals and the lives that they live and the lives that they are not able to choose for themselves. So that was why I dedicated my life to fighting for them and fighting for their ability to one day in the future lead a life that's free from cruelty. And the last point I wanted to make on the McDonald's McPlant Burger, it's amazing. Animal Outlook was actually mobilizing supporters to demand a vegan option at McDonald's via social media action alerts and demonstrations advocating for chicken welfare standards and changes in the company's supply chain. We were actually part of placing a McDonald's cruelty billboard in Times Square. So since the campaign started, Animal Outlook has really tried to maintain that vegan menu item ask and put on the pressure by way of call-ins, social media actions, and emails. So we're really happy about that news.
Animal Outlook is one of my favorite organizations. They do so much amazing, relentless organization. Here is the just screen grab of, hi, dairy-free alternatives. There's so many of them. And I can tell you that the Good Food Institute has done in-depth reporting that dairy-free milks alternatives, whether it's hemp milk, rice milk, soy milk, cashew milk, oat milk, is taking off. It is the fastest growing sector within the vegan food space. And it's one of the fastest growing sectors in the supermarket in general, the supermarket space. People are starting to realize, especially during the pandemic, it lasts longer. It stays fresh because it's not the breast milk of a cow longer. It's got zero cholesterol. Do you see that? I certainly think your work, anybody who can look at these videos and still go and have the breast milk of cows after that, I would say, I don't know. I don't even understand it. But your work has been very instrumental in it's multi-determined. You've got to say this is good for your health. The alternatives are better for you, better for the planet. But then you also have to show the truth. If you buy dairy milk, the breast milk of cows, you are essentially underwriting this cruelty. You are underwriting it with every dollar you spend. Can you address that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, like I said before, the dairy industry tries to maintain that you need dairy products in your life, that they are performing this public service to consumers, that they need these products, but consumers are slowly waking up to that reality with all of these plant-based alternatives that we have available to us. The fact that, you know, a lot of our supporters are making their voices heard. The fact are not wanting to support this industry that is profiting off of the suffering of these animals. I wholeheartedly believe that we have a choice here to tell the dairy industry that enough is enough. And this is an industry that is fighting tooth and nail to keep us entrenched in the past, to keep us utilizing these horrible practices against these animals who are, you know, trapped in this system without any options available to them. This is the life that they live. But we can let our voices be heard, and we can choose plant-based options. And I think that is one of the ways that we can continue to, you know, move forward to a better future. And then also with supporting undercover investigations. It's hard work, and it's hard for people to watch these videos. But when you see, like at Dick Van Dam Dairy, the fact that they were letting these sick cows suffer without medication or euthanasia or veterinary care. These are things that you can't really see unless you're there at the farm site, at the factory farm site. But undercover videos expose that so that you don't have to be there. That's why I went undercover for months at these places, so that people can get that inside look behind the closed doors and see the truth of what is truly going on at these facilities, and demand a better future for these animals.
We have one more very short clip, and then I'm going to ask you about some of your hair-raising experiences on the other side.
It's time for me to share with you the truth of how dairy is made, all caught on my hidden camera. The dairy industry is fueled by death, which is evident in the countless lifeless bodies of calves I saw on the farm. It's shocking. The dairy industry has manipulated advertising to American families so much that many of us still believe that milk is a harmless product. But that couldn't be any further from the truth. In dairy, male calves simply aren't profitable. The calves who did survive, the females sent to grow until they could then be impregnated and milked, may live longer, but their lives will be full of agony. Scared and injured cows are crowded into what the industry calls the milking parlor and hooked up to automatic, mechanized milking machines. I still remember standing in the parlor, sick to my stomach, while I watched workers and a manager brutally strike cows with wooden canes and a metal rod, night after night. On a night I'll never forget, cows were being hit so violently, there were loud cracks that rang through the parlor like thunder.
Now, once again, we invite the attorneys and the representatives, any and all representatives from this individual farm or the industry on at any time. We'd love to dialogue. You've said wherever you've gone in dairy undercover, you see the same thing. And part of it is, you know, the whole system involves ripping a baby away from his or her mother. We're drinking the breast milk, not we, I don't, but people who drink breast milk of cows that is intended for calves. The mothers want to be with the babies want to be with the mothers. When you pull them away, the babies become despondent. Often they don't want to drink the replacement. And the workers, they have a schedule. It's not that these individuals, this is my observation, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that I've seen, is it the individuals or is it the system that puts these individuals who are the low-line workers in a situation where in order to do their jobs, they have to exhibit the cruelty because the system is designed to do something unnatural to the animals?
Yes, it's definitely something that can wholly be, you know, placed on the system. This industry that they're, you know, perpetuating these practices. There are a lot of standard practices where they involve the act of separating a calf from their mother. And and also forcefully impregnating these mother cows so that they can have these calves and then produce that milk that is meant for the calf to be sold for human consumption. And then when that calf is removed from their mother at Dick Van Dam Dairy, these newborn calves, if they were male, they were essentially just left out in the hot sun and left to just rot. They did not receive any veterinary care, any euthanasia, any medication. And I did not once witness a worker administer any type of care to these calves. And they would just, one day I would see them alive. The next day I would come back onto the farm site and they would be dead. That was the reality at Dick Van Dam Dairy. At the other dairy that I investigated in a completely different state in Pennsylvania, there were calves who were being disbudded and dehorned. And that was the act of pressing a hot iron against their skulls to burn away the horns that grow there. And this occurs at 90% of the dairy factory farms across the country. So this is a standard practice that involves causing some type of harm to these animals, and it's part of the industry's, daily routine. So when you have workers who are okay with, the fact that they have to cause some type of pain, they're desensitized eventually within, a couple of years or even, a couple of weeks, because they understand that they are, in this environment where they are, the animals are seen as lesser than. And that ability to feel the emotions or anything that cows are capable of is taken away from them. It's stripped of them by the industry, and they're viewed as products. They're viewed as objects. And when you have overpaid, overworked workers who are present in this environment where they're frustrated and they're having to deal with these animals, rarely receiving any humane handling training. I didn't when I was at Dick Van Dam Dairy. You have a case of these frustrations boiling over and that resulting in workers committing some act of cruelty against these animals. It's just a toxic cocktail. It's a horrible environment, and the industry is trying to perpetuate this system.
And obviously there have been other investigations, the now notorious Fairlife investigation, where they actually promoted themselves proactively with tours as being wonderful to the animals, and then behind the scenes horrific footage was found. What do you make of the fact that the USDA is not responding to this? Like, where was the USDA? Were USDA inspectors there?
At Dick Van Dam Dairy, I did not once witness any USDA inspection taking place there. And it was mind-boggling to me because of all of these things that were taking place there, that there are these sick cows who are not receiving any veterinary care or medication or euthanasia. Newborn calves just dying left and right at this factory farm site. There were also these downed cows. The industry deems these cows as downers. If they're too sick or unable to stand or injured, they are, at Dick Van Dam Dairy, they had metal hip clamps affixed to their hips and compressed on their hips and then dragged by tractors through dirt and feces. And then they were abandoned in pens without access to food or water. All of these things were taking place, and yet no one was doing anything about it. And nothing was going to come of it. These cows would continue to suffer in silence if it wasn't for the undercover video that I was able to capture while I was there. And the industry is scared of these undercover videos. They don't want people to see what's actually going on behind the closed doors of the facilities that they're profiting from.
Now, I want to go to one other thing, and that is the milk that is pink. Here is the shot. What did you learn about this? Because this, just from a gross standpoint, is pretty interesting.
It was definitely heartbreaking to see that regardless of what state of health these cows were in, they were still sent into the milking parlor. They were still milked. I did witness the milking tools in the parlor, sometimes containing blood within the milking tools. And then the workers would then unhook the milking tool and then divert that milking equipment into a white bucket, as you saw, and that's still there. And then the blood and milk would be filtered into that white bucket, and then they would just dump it out. So these cows are in pain, most likely, and they're still having to endure the milking process, and then just to have the milk thrown out afterwards. And again, I did not see a veterinarian on site to treat these cows, and yet they were still just sent through that horrific, a painful process of having their udders, having those tools attached to their udders and then being milked. It was really sickening.
There is a lawsuit. Animal Legal Defense Fund has filed a lawsuit. What do you know about that? When's that coming up?
Yeah, so Animal Legal Defense Fund has filed a lawsuit. We at Animal Outlook, they're actually seeking the closure of the facility. We at Animal Outlook, when we had initially, finished the investigation, we went with all the investigations materials to the sheriff's office, and they did not want to pursue any criminal charges or anything like that, or any types of charges or repercussions for Dick Van Dam Dairy. And then we also, we reached out to the district attorney, and then they also, we didn't hear anything back from them, basically. So this is a standard issue of trying to sweep this under the rug, trying to hope that it goes away, that, people will forget about it eventually. But what we can do is just keep the pressure on. Let the dairy industry know that this will not be tolerated. We're not going to continue to have these dairy investigations come out and nothing be done. There has to be some type of, repercussions for Dick Van Dam Dairy and all the other larger institutions and corporations that were profiting from the cruelty that I documented at this facility, because it was so egregious and it cannot go unnoticed.
Now, for those who say, "Oh, I don't want to look at this," you were there. What you experienced, this is like a tiny little just a hint of what you experienced as a human being day after day. What was the inner strength that allowed you to continue to not wake up and say, I just can't do this? I mean, the idea of having to wear a hidden camera, the anxiety of that, the fear, the witnessing and not being able to help. It almost sounds like a recipe for psychological torture for you. How, again, it really blows my mind. I always say, of all the people in the animal rights movement, the undercover investigators are the unsung heroes. And this is the first time you're coming out, but often, you had no idea whether, just tell me, where did you get the inner strength?
It's actually a really great question, because towards the end of the investigation, I could feel myself, mentally, emotionally, physically, I was nearly done. But something that kept me going at the end of the investigation was the opportunity to rescue 2 calves, which is something I'd never been able to do before. I'd never been able to rescue any of the animals at any of the factory farm sites that I visited. It was just not an option. It wasn't a possibility. But at Dick Van Dam Dairy, my very last investigation, I had the ability to rescue 2 calves. And that was what kept me going through those final weeks, where I was witnessing these workers hitting these cows, striking them on their bodies with these wooden canes, and in some cases a metal pipe, on a near daily basis. The screaming, the shouting, the cursing at these animals who were frightened, myself seeing all these newborn calves just dying in the dirt, wasting away. I was pushing forward for the lives of those 2 calves. And I was able to rescue them eventually at the very end of my investigation. Their names were Hank and Samuel. And I was able to have them transferred to Animal Place Sanctuary in California. And they tried their very best to keep Hank alive, but ultimately the effects of dairy life were too hard on his body, and he eventually did die, as many of those newborn calves at Dick Van Dam Dairy did. The effects of dairy life were just too strong for him to fight against, regardless of how the efforts of Animal Place and their staff there. But Samuel is alive and well, and I'm so grateful for that. I've had the chance to see him run and jump and thrive in that sanctuary, where he does not have to go through that, pattern of suffering that other cows have to go through in the dairy industry. That's the future I'm fighting for, the future that Hank has to look forward to, a life free from suffering and cruelty.
Well, when you've saved one life, you've saved the world for that individual. And Animal Place is an amazing organization. Animal Outlook is an amazing organization. You are my hero. I have hope for the future because of people like you, because of not people like you, because of you, and what you did. It brings tears to my eyes, what you endured. And every person who still consumes dairy, please reconsider. Please try one of the other amazing cholesterol-free alternatives. And for those who are already vegan, double down on your activism, because no matter what we do, nothing compares to what you endured. And I know this. I know what you did is so incredibly hard that it actually defies description with words. So you are my hero. Thank you for everything you do. And we'll keep you updated here at Jane Unchained on all the legal actions and the lawsuit and what happens. And again, we invite the representatives from this farm or any farm or the dairy industry as a whole on any time. We would love to dialogue with you. Thank you, Erin Wing. Way to go, girl.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Bye.
Bye.